so tonight, just to do a quick review of our agenda, we are going to do our usual introductions and announcements, which I'll talk us through in just a minute. My name's Selena. I'm a member of the Ward 1 Steering Committee. Then we're going to hear from our city councilors, Allie and Carter. Then we're going to hear from our school commissioners, Gary and Matt. And then we have a special guest, Gail Rosenberg, who's going to talk to us about the Burlington History and Culture Center project. And then we're going to hear from Charles Dillard, the city planner, about the Transportation Demand Management Action Plan and some other things related to his role and work. And that is our agenda for tonight. And I'm going to do my best to get us out of here by 8:30, like on time, which means that I might be hustling us along at times. So we usually start by just doing introductions where we go around, share our name, what street we live on. And if you have any just really general announcements, you can share them during the introduction period. So those would be things like an event that's coming up that you know is of interest to the ward, meetings, activities, things like that. Following the introductions, we'll have a little bit more time for kind of what we call speak out, which is more when you want to express an opinion or an appreciation or a concern about something that you think is relevant to the ward. Or if there's, an upcoming meeting, but you want to really talk a little bit about the content of the meeting and why folks should turn out, that's probably more appropriate for the speak out portion of our go round. Does that make sense to everyone, the distinction? Yeah. Okay, so Charlie.
There's 4 wireless mics out there. If you turn them on, so that the green lights on, speak. You don't use the microphone, they're not going to be recorded very likely on the recording, and the people online won't hear you. Second thing is, anybody that's between the camera and the pillar, you're not going to be able to hear them all night. So just letting you know. Yes, Celine's there. I'm not going to be able to hear those people.
Where would you like me to stand? Okay. Well, now I'm just blocking the, okay. Okay, so would someone like to start us off on this end of things? Is there a mic over here? Maybe Sam, would you like to start us off?
Sure.
Thank you. So we could go around that way and then just keep looping back around until we get everybody. So your name, where you live, and if you have a quick announcement.
My name is Sam and I live over on Colonial Square.
Hi, I'm Allie Schachter. I live on North Williams. Was sworn in as your East District City Councilor on Monday.
Richard Hilliard, High Grove Court.
Hello, Troy Hedrick. I live on Billadu Court. I am one of your state reps as well.
Hi, I'm Rob Gutman. I live on North William Street, and I am now on the NPA steering committee.
Go back and make those work. That works.
Hi, Sharon Busher. I live on East Avenue.
Marianne Price. I live on North Prospect.
Angie Chapel-Sokol. I live on North Prospect.
Gail Rosenberg. I live in the South End. Thanks for letting me in.
Peter Lukowski, East Avenue, Burlington Co-Housing.
Cheryl Green, East Avenue, Burlington Co-Housing.
Catherine Bach. I live upstairs.
Catherine, will you pass just to the last 3 folks up here and then we'll go around the back?
Jean Keller, Billado Parkway.
Karen Long, Henry Street.
Lisa Lax, Tebow Parkway.
Nice. Dee and Carol, would you like to start us off over there? Do you have a mic?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dee Selmer. I live on Clark.
I'm Carol Livingston, and I'm also on the Ward 1 Steering Committee.
I'm Mark Demers, and I live at 140 Loomis.
I'm Jonathan Chapel-Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street, and I'm a member of the steering committee.
I'm Tom Darenthal. I live on Nash Place.
I'm Dave Cawley. I also live on Nash Place.
I'm Catherine Verman. I live on North Street.
I'm Lynn Severance. I live next door.
Carter Newbeezer, Riverside Ave, and Ward 1 City Councilor. I'm Brian Chena. I live on Isham Street, and I'm the other state representative, along with Troy Hedrick. And my announcement is next Wednesday night is the next meeting of the Legislative Universal Healthcare Caucus, and we're going to be looking at the current state health care plan before the House Healthcare Committee and how it might be a vehicle to take a step towards universal healthcare in Vermont. I see Earhart came in.
Earhart, do you want to do a quick introduction? You, of course, are going to have to grab a handheld mic.
Hi, folks. Sorry to come in late. Earhart Monka, 60 Grove Street.
And I'm just a guest. I'm Evan Litwin, Ward 7 City Councilor from the Old North End / New North End. Anyone else didn't go?
Do we introduce ourselves?
Okay. Yeah, please do.
I'm Shawnee. I work for CEDO as the NPA support liaison.
And this event is being recorded by Town Meeting Television, and I'm Charlie. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for those of you supporting us in our meeting tonight and everybody for turning out. So now we are moving into the Speak Out portion of our evening, and we have there's 4 participants online. There's 2 participants online. Would you like to I'm so sorry. Would you like to unmute yourself and say hello to the room?
Sophie Quest from Chase Street.
Hold on, we're just trying to get the volume a little better adjusted here.
Yeehaw. My wife's picture is Lucretia. I'm Cyril Flash at Burlington Co-housing off East Avenue.
We can't hear you, Cyril. Hold on 1 minute.
Let's see. How about now?
Not yet. We'll let you know.
Okay.
I can hear him.
Yeah. So my wife used my computer while she was in town, so I haven't gotten rid of or dealt with Google stuff. So I'll figure out how to get. Anyway, I'm Cyril.
It's not you, it was us, and we can hear you now just fine.
Okay.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Okay, so I'm Cyril Flash, even though the picture looks like my wife, Lucretia. Yeah, I'm off of East Avenue in Burlington, Ward 1.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I did already. I did introduce myself.
Sorry, that may have been when we were still troubleshooting our sound. Would you be willing to give it another go?
Chase Street and Old East End Neighborhood Coalition.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are now moving into the Speak Out portion of our evening, and we've got about 15 minutes for anybody who's got an issue, a concern, an appreciation. I see Peter Lekowski.
I was at a.
And I know that Charlie's going to ask you to hold a mic, so.
Oh, yeah, of course. I was at a demonstration on Saturday, pretty massive demonstration with a lot of very angry and very worried people. One of the things that was a key element run through most of everybody's mind was free speech and deportations. So but it's easy to get ignored, and I think a lot of individuals waving signs do get ignored. There's another level we could move to maybe have our voices heard, and that is it's more institutional bodies of recognized, elected, and otherwise genuine officials of the government, such as city councils. And there will be a resolution that will be it will be in support of free speech, the First Amendment, the right of dissent, and also about Rumesa Öztürk and Mahmoud rather, Khalil, and others like them who are being arbitrarily detained and deported. The resolution, I'm not going to try to, obviously it's a long resolution with many clauses and whereases, but basically it's in support of free speech. And I understand that the city council has already had copies of this, and I'll be interested to hear from our councilors how they feel about this. And I do want to mention that I think that one of the objections to such resolutions is often that it's not really city business. But I think that's really a very false, as I said, it's very easy to ignore individuals. And I think that this is an important enough issue to where it's our business at every conceivable level, from individual right up to the top. And every official at every level needs to be on record and give a real support to free speech and the First Amendment right and the rights of others like the green card holders and all the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And I think we will hear some more about the resolution during the councilor updates. Sharon.
It's not on.
So in addition to all of the other. Press the button.
It doesn't, that's not going to amplify her in the room. It's to help with the broadcast.
Thank you, Charlie, for the amplification.
It's Sam. We get Sam. Thanks, Sam. Yeah.
So I'll try to speak louder. So in addition to all the other really critical issues, I wanted to give you a masked face of someone that has been doged. I work for the federal government, and a few days ago, I was informed that I was no longer doing it. And there are so many people in the community and in the state that are being impacted by this. I'm older, and you might say, well, you know, she'll be okay, but I really needed the income. And so, and for younger people, and sometimes both partners are in government, they're floundering, not knowing what to do, especially as you have all talked about. Sometimes it's in regards to science, when clinical trials are being ended, if any of your family members are on a clinical trial and there's a drug that is providing them maybe a chance for survival, that stops. That stops, and no restart. Because I worked in healthcare, you know, I was involved in clinical trials, and these are people are dying because of some of these careless, irresponsible decisions. So not only are jobs being lost, but lives are being lost. And as Peter was talking about free speech, but the deportation process and people being sent to outrageous places, El Salvador, in a prison that is unspeakable. You know, our government isn't functioning right. Congress has lost its voice, or doesn't choose to use its voice, and the judicial system is under attack. And I'm really very, very worried. Free speech is just one very important arm, but there are so many things. And I think protesting is one thing. I just feel, unfortunately, I also, like so many people, feel powerless. I just don't, I hope we come out of this, but it is incredibly challenging right now. And I just wanted you to know that maybe one of your neighbors, like me, might find themselves in this situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I'm so sorry to hear that was your experience, and hope you'll let us all know how we can support you and appreciate you. Can we hand the mic back to Catherine? Thank you.
Reminder that I was talking to my neighbor right over the fence a little while ago, and her car was parked really deep in her driveway, and she happened to leave it unlocked last night, and it was broken into and things were stolen. So lock your cars.
A very powerful and potent reminder. Thank you.
Hi. Seems not so important like a first world problem with these other ones that have been raised, but I have a McClure garage update. Martha Lang and I filed to intervene on the certificate of need application the hospital filed to tear down the McClure garage on Colchester Avenue and replace it with at least a 4-story garage looming over East Avenue. We filed for party status. We were denied party status, but we were given what they called amicus status, which doesn't allow us to cross-examine them and everything, but it does give us access to all the documents they have to file, and we can file questions to the Green Mountain Care Board to ask them. So we insisted on getting structural engineer reports that show that, in fact, the garage ought to be torn down. Martha Lang had been trying to get those all during the MOU debates and discussions, and the hospital refused to give them up. We told the Green Mountain Care Board that, and they told the hospital they must file those with them. So I dug Steve Goodkind out of the woodwork. If you remember Steve, said, Steve, I need an engineer. I don't know what this says. So we looked over the reports that were filed, which were 4 studies done from 2020 to 2024 by structural engineers telling them what the status of the garage was. First red flag, the first report in 2020 said from the structural engineers, you've asked us to tell you what the status of the garage is with you're expecting it to only be there for 4 more years. So in 2020, they decided that in 2024, they wanted to tear it down. Period. The engineering report came back and said, wow, this garage is in really good shape. You just need to do this, this, and this. So the next year, they got a report from another engineer that said, okay, we're going to do a study as you've requested, expecting the usable life of this garage as you want to use it for the next 3 years. So they ticked off 1 more year, and the report said, you just need to fix this, 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 and this. Thank you very much. So the next year, same kind of thing. 2 years left on this garage. This is what you should do if you're only going to be keeping it for 2 more years. The next one, which was 2024, and this is when they were in the middle of the MOU discussions with all of us, refused to talk about the berm, refused to talk about the land under the garage. That engineer came back and said, well, you know, if you spend $3 million now and another $4 million over the next 20 years, you can keep this garage going for another 20 years. Meaning, not a 4-year life, not a 3-year life, not they have to tear it down and replace it. It could live for 20 more years. And Steve confirmed all this. He said, it sounds to me like they decided in 2020 they wanted the land under the garage, which is what we suspected all along. And they've been letting it fall to, and I filed lengthy commentary on this. We haven't heard back from them. I remember Bernie Sanders advising me one time when I said, Bernie, do you think they're listening? He said, I don't know, but we ruined their effing day. So, you know, we may get them to not tear down that garage and tear down the berm and tear all of that out. The other thing is if they want us to back off, they just have to give us what they didn't give us in the MOU. And then that would be the berm, all the green space, height limits, everything. And gosh, you know, we'll back off, maybe. I don't know. But Martha and I are still working on that. We filed individually, so we each individually have our own cause of action on this. But anyway, if you want to be on my email list for updates on this, let me know. Thank you for the time.
Yes, you can just keep that in the audience with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for that advocacy on behalf of our neighborhood and just like such a detailed and diligent report. Richard, I think you're going to be our final speak out unless there's something really burning after this.
Thanks. So as a result of Karen's alerting us to the situation with the parking, residential parking, I beg your pardon. So there was a lot of correspondence with the TUC, and the TUC meeting on, I think it was March the 25th. Mr. Councillor Litwin was on the Zoom call. Just before the meeting took place, we got an email from a city councillor which said, other councillors on the TUC, as well as the planning director, they have agreed to remove the entire residential parking permit part of the TDM plan. Never remember exactly what it is, transportation development management or something. It won't be brought forward again unless there is broad support for changes in the affected area. So I believe that neighborhood attendance at the TUC meeting was reduced as a result of that. People that were geared up to go to it to ask that any decision be made there or deferred. We get to the meeting, Jean Keller was there, I was there, and we're told that no, that's not true. So there's a sort of a troubling disconnect, to put it not as nicely as I possibly can. Cockney rhyming slang would say that someone's telling porkies, which means pork pies lies. Porkies. Someone's telling porkies. Little white lies may be then, may not be white ass whoppers, but we need to get to the bottom of this. And if we can get to the bottom of it with Councillor Litwin, sorry about that, and Charles Dillard tonight, that would be very helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. I think that's very much our goal. And just for anybody who's wondering what TUC stands for, I think it's the Transportation Utilities and Energy Committee of the City Council. But we are going to hear about the Transportation Demand Management Plan later tonight from the city planner. Okay. We are going to move. I'm not seeing any other urgent hand flying up, which means we're remarkably on time so far for a ward NPA meeting. So I'm going to turn things over to our city councilors for their update, their first joint update. If you all just take turns with this. Oh, my son, then you'll. We've got about 30 minutes for you, so maybe we'll break you and do, no more than 10 minutes of updates a piece, and then we'll just leave it. Great.
Hi. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you all as finally being sworn in. Carter and I, we're going to be sharing some updates. Carter's going to take the lead on that. And then I wanted to take a little bit of time to also invite, as we're now kicking off the next session of City Council, it's my first time in this seat, to hold a little bit of space for some sort of generative conversation in whatever format feels right around priorities, hopes, goals, what you all would like to see from City Council as we enter this next session. So I thought we'd take a little bit of time to have a nice discussion as well. And that is selfishly very helpful for me as well, as we're kind of kicking off. So yeah, so that's what we'll do, but nice to see you all.
Well, hey, everybody. Well, yeah, welcome to my seatmate. It's been good so far and excited to get to work. So I'll just very quickly for a few minutes, and then I don't know if you want to do questions before or after generative for a couple minutes. Yeah. So just quick bullet points, because we've only had one meeting. It was reorg. Yeah. Yeah, no, my bad, my bad. Is this good? All right. So a few quick updates. We just had reorganization meetings, so there wasn't any official business. Really, the main few things, Chief LaChance, if folks haven't heard, the fire chief is retiring after 26 years in June. Yeah, I want to say June 30th. Yeah. So a real loss, but I know I was talking to him after reorganization and he feels confident that there's going to be continuity in the transition and feels like there's a good solid team there and we can sort of see the progress they've made, especially around responding to overdoses and just a couple of programs that they've stood up over the last few years since COVID are going to continue and keep rolling. So sad to see him go, but appreciative of his work. Chief Burke, the police chief, has officially started, which we've talked a little bit about already, but he is in the job. Just emailed him this week to wanted to give him a breath before outreaching, but going to grab a coffee with him and things like traffic enforcement, some other issues that I want to bring up that I've heard from folks are a priority. There is, some of you have already gotten it. I've gotten essentially this half of Ward 1 going this way, but a year 1 update from me should be at people's doorsteps in the next few weeks. I'm doing the lit drop by myself, so it'll take, a couple weeknights here, but that should be coming. So if you haven't received it yet, that should be at your door, hopefully by the end of April. And then like Peter had mentioned, there's going to be a free speech resolution in front of the council, mainly focused on what's happening federally. There's, if folks haven't followed the reporting, a number of college students expressing political views who, it sounds like something I'm making up because it's so wild, but who've just had unmarked cars drive up, take these college students into those cars and drive away. And so, yeah, with no identification and otherwise, yeah, it's incredibly, no, in mostly university towns across the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And on the 14th, one of the folks that has been impacted from Tufts University is going to have a trial in Burlington. And so it's been in the news and is certainly going to be a topic of discussion coming up. So anyway, I'm always ending on cheery notes these days. But I'll turn it over to Allie, and yeah, we want to get a sense of what folks' priorities are so that we can make sure we're reflecting those in the coming year. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that'll be out in the next couple of days, I think.
My question was, do you know what committees you're on? I wasn't using the mic, excuse me.
I believe that's coming in the next couple of days, certainly before Monday's meeting.
Yeah, the only one we know is I'll be on Board of Finance, which is a shift. But otherwise, yeah, Monday.
So we could, I wonder if it makes sense to start with maybe if folks have some questions and then we could open up the floor to sort of have that generative, what are some folks' top priorities or hopes or what you'd like to see the council take up this year, or we could transition right into that and save time at the end for questions. What feels right? Yeah.
This is a question more about process. I was very disturbed to read in 7 days about the texting that was happening among city councilors and just the atmosphere that suggests, being so partisan and so unfriendly, not working together. I know both of you have said that your goal is to work together, and I'm just wondering what you see happening in response to this article and what is your stance around it?
You're telling us, Lisa. Yeah, I think it is concerning. If anybody, I want to be charitable to my fellow counselors and myself. While at the same time, I have talked a little bit about it. I think the mood on the council as the first years progressed has gotten rough. That article came out and my mother texted me and said, "Watch your language." So that was a rough moment, but for the most part, I do think that we are in a reset moment. I think I'll just say, I don't want to speak on behalf of my seatmate here. We've already gotten off to a really good start in terms of working together and having some genuine collaboration and building some trust between the caucuses. And I think that will, our, not to, hype us up too much, but I think our ability to work together will improve that in the year to come is my hope. And I do think that there is a genuine desire from, I think Mark is leading the Democratic caucus this year and Jean to work better together. And I think some of the things that coming out of that article, it's one of the reasons I decided to run for council president this past reorganization day. And I think some of the things that I laid out and other folks have talked about from either city council caucus in terms of process and how do we just function better as a body are going to be moving forward in the coming years. So I guess that'd be my 2 cents. Not the body's finest moment, but I do think there's an opening here with a new iteration of the council to do things a little bit differently.
I can just quickly chime in and reiterate that I'm really committed to collaboration and to being a positive team player. I obviously am coming in after the article, that I was not part of that. But I'm really committed to being a positive team player. And I think this moment demands collaboration from us. And I said that a lot while I was running for the election. And I continue to hold that, that we're in a really perilous moment as a country. And, I think in our city, it's so important that we come together and be unified in being and keeping us a strong community. So I bring that orientation to city council, and yeah, Carter and I are already establishing a really nice working relationship. So
is the amplification working for everyone?
Yeah, it's great.
Is it high enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
So are there any other questions, or should we kind of open up the floor for a generative? Yes. Okay, what's our end time?
Thanks.
Your end time is 7:30.
Okay, great.
So you've got about 20 minutes.
Great.
I know the city is under a lot of budget pressure, and we were under budget pressure last year as well. Do we currently have any provisions to give property tax relief, municipal tax relief to people of meager incomes? I work as a tax aide with AARP, and I can tell you that people are coming in, they have houses that are worth like $350,000 or so, and their tax bills are more than they can afford when their only income is from Social Security. So do we have something in play now? I had read about the education tax credit that people can apply for. And I thought in there was a provision for municipal taxes as well, but I think I may not have understood it correctly.
Yeah, Earhart's raising his hand, so he probably knows better. My guess is no. I mean, there's nothing equivalent to what the state ed fund has at the municipal level. I think that's the main focus, among other things, in terms of shifting the burden, the cost burden of the mayor's, the tax relief group or tax fairness group. That should have results. I know they've met a couple times now, but should be coming back in the next 2 or 3 months with a set of recommendations. But Earhart, if you want to jump in.
I just want to say, so there is, until the legislature changes the way the education funding is changed, and that's going to, I think, there's going to be a transition time, but there has always been a so-called circuit breaker for people under 40, I think it's $47,000 annually. I could
Education or for municipal?
For municipal. separate. Yeah. For low income folks, the circuit breaker is there for both the statewide education property tax as well as for the municipal side of the property tax.
I suggest you put, not, you promote home share for people that are in their homes alone and can't, because I thought that guy last month was really great. And I know people who have done that and had people live with them. And it's not only, a little bit of money, but it's companionship and help. So, I mean, I think of myself alone in the house when or if that ever happens. And I know I would want somebody. So I thought the home share is a really great resource out there. So anyway, thanks. The one thing I wanted to ask about was the recycling program. I know we'd save some money, but I did ask Gothiers, who is our trash person, and I think we pay 26 something a month for the recycling part of our bill. No, 26.43 or whatever it is for the 3 months or however often we get the bill. So I asked them, what will it cost if we need you to pick up our recycling? And they, of course, don't know. That will be going out to bid. But Carter mentioned this before, it will probably cost more if we each individually hire someone than if the city works out something. And people will stop recycling. That's the worst part. People will they have their trash toter, they're going to throw everything away because they won't have their blue toter that'll get picked up. So I think that's the biggest problem with that. And I understand Chapin has trouble, finding employees. But I just think, I don't have one family member, and I have a big family. Everyone I know in different states all have a trash toter, a green toter for brush and food, compost, and a blue toter for recycling. So I really wish we could get to that. So I encourage, and I know that's one of your tasks coming up, but I encourage you to really work hard on that. Thank you.
I can just quickly say, obviously, I'm not yet really dove into the budgeting process, but I think thinking creatively about how we can preserve recycling is a priority of mine. I assume I share that with Carter. And also doing whatever we possibly can do to not continue to burden the residential tax base. I know that we're really, it's very expensive to live here right now. And I feel that personally too. So Tom, just to your point, I can tell you that will be a priority. And I imagine I'm also speaking for Carter there. To think about, I don't know if relief is in the cards immediately. If it were, I think in this tax working group might uncover some strategies for that, but certainly trying to keep increases minimal, if at all, is what I really hope to figure out how we might do.
And just to throw 2 cents in, I think there's, I think we're going to see different proposals by the time we get to budgeting season around recycling. I do think there's a legitimate concern or sort of problem we need to face, which is we have to cut costs somewhere, and wherever we cut them is going to be painful. So I think that's fair. In my view, this is the wrong place to be looking, and I think the savings that we'd gain out of this doesn't. I think at the point of sale, even if we had to increase taxes to cover the cost of higher wages so we can hire people, the capital costs over time, it's still going to be less. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I have rough math from folks smarter than me. It'll still be less at the point of sale for consumers. So if that's the path, or there's it's not like all or nothing. There's different ways that we could zone out. We talked about, and I think it was in 2018, the council considered zoning out municipal trash across the city, or maybe it was 2022. Can't remember. But I think there's sort of environmental benefits to that in terms of less trucks, livability benefits to that in terms of less noise and whatever, efficiency, etc. There's, livability, and then there's obviously the tax savings in terms of depending if you're owning the trucks as a city versus if a company's owning the trucks and maintaining them. in my view, I think we should be doing everything we can over, and it's not immediate, but setting ourselves up to move to completely municipalized trash, recycling, compost as a part of paying our massive property tax bills. That should just be a benefit of being a resident. We're not there yet, but that's what I've always thought.
I have something that I'd like you to think about for this new session. Prior to your election, Ally, there was a work session for the city council on impact fees. It was a rushed work session at best, and I feel that I really hope that you all have a chance to really look at what is being proposed. I have some concerns about what is being proposed. So there was a laundry list of categories: schools, parks, libraries, police, fire. Why am I drawing a blank? Now there's TDM and water and wastewater. Though water and wastewater were not included recently, and that was something that really should be addressed, and they're now being included. But the proposal is to keep all those categories, but only fund the TDM and the water wastewater. Yet there are comparison charts that I hope you all will look at that show other communities around us that definitely 5 out of 7 of those communities fund parks. And I think that you also want to hear from Ashley, whatever her last name is, who's the capital projects person, who will tell you that in the new development that's being proposed, there are significant dollars that could be captured from impact fees for parks. And so I want you to understand fiscally what this means. And I think that the study that was done prior to this new administration in, Trump coming in, and the way that grants are being pulled and everything is unstable. And so funding for some of these other categories, which have grant funding, are no longer a guarantee at best. So I hope that this city council this new council will ask to spend a little more time before you make the decision. It's up to you to decide. It's in your ballpark to decide what we should fund. And I'll respect that. But I feel that having, I watch on Zoom. Having seen that work session, I felt it was very brief because you had, I think, 3 work sessions that night. And I feel it's deserving of more attention because we don't want to leave significant dollars there when we could use them in our community. So thank you.
Thanks. I want to just follow on to that, Sharon. I had a very brief conversation with Gene Bergman about it, and he's pretty much Gene. And I think Gene knows a lot about impact fees. And part of the problem is how fast you have to spend them. And you have to have a program. You have to have a program that's available that you can use in a time frame. And I was thinking about this in the context of the library because that's where my heart is. And we have used impact fees in the past to fund things, but it's almost fortuitous. So I'm wondering, and this is a question, and it may be totally off the wall, but I'm wondering whether this contraction to just a couple of the categories is flexible enough that when something comes up in a, for the parks or for the library, where impact fees might be of value, it might be accessible, where the default might be to TDM and water, that there may be ways to draw some of that money if the opportunity presents itself in another area. And maybe it's impossible. Okay. So my other question is, I think you both agree that that recycling is not the way to save money, and you both know that we need to save money. So what do you think are the ways what do we need to do to save money? Where are the places that you think efficiencies might be found or improvements in our processes so that things can be done cheaper. Have any guesses or ideas right now?
I have a few. I'll say there was a number when I came in around how we do workforce development, the relationship between CEDO and Workforce Development Office, IT, and the relationship between our IT department and BPD's IT department. There's 2 or 3 others that I raised with the mayor early on. They were pretty like low-hanging fruit that I had heard just from, I don't know, when you run for office, you go talk to a bunch of people who've been around and have more knowledge than you to learn, and she's incorporated those. So I think a lot of those low-hanging efficiencies are being found. We're reducing a number of staff positions in a number of departments. We're combining departments because certain functions of government are being duplicated over and over locally. And so there's better ways that we can operate without just slashing services. So that's all to say, I don't have a good answer to your question because now we have to go a layer deeper. But I think it's a fair concern. We are going to have to give up something. And I think that's the response that I got around recycling when I pretty early on and immediately said, you know, I helped former counselors who represented us on the municipalization push years ago. And I can't remember what year it was because I'm losing it, I guess. But but we have to pick the pain points. And I think things like solid waste, affordable housing investment, code enforcement are the places you invest. And then we have to have a conversation because maybe it is less, we'll get there. I mean, that's going to be part of the whole next 2 or 3 months of what do we have to cut. But we have both sort of reasonably raised revenues and decreased spending pretty aggressively. So we got to continue because we're still not there. We can't, and just for context too, we've grown total city staff over 100 positions, close to 100 positions over the last 10 years. So it's not just that growth, it's also healthcare costs are one of the biggest drivers because we're seeing 15, 20%, 25% increases year over year on overall healthcare spending. So it's something has to give there.
Just a comment, and I looked at the 2 highest categories for city spending, and I think it's retirement is number 1, and interest on money we've borrowed is number 2. Or I might have those backwards. I was very surprised that those are the top 2 categories.
Wow. That's a lot. You know, I just thought of something. I'm not sure if you've been asked this, but I believe it was Sandy Wynn. I can't remember now who told me this, but with the parking and the fees that they collect, a parking meter person told one of our Ward 1 constituents that until they owe $2,500 in fines, the city doesn't go after them. So that does not make sense. I know that Chapin was asked this. I don't think he's ever responded because I've never been told what the answer was because we are both questioning it. So to me, that's something I'd like to know. Why are we giving out these $75 parking tickets for residential parking or whatever the parking is? But it was if a car will not be towed actually a car can be towed, but they just have to pay the tow amount and they do not have to pay the fine to the city. And that just doesn't make sense to me.
This is kind of old news, but I remain interested in it. And that is UVM is in some disarray now. I mean, really, because they have a new president. And so that will take some getting used to. But I remain interested in the MOU that has never been completed or completed to the city's satisfaction. And I really, really encourage you to see if you can give a, like a good dope slap to the university so that they can better understand their contribution to the high price of housing in this community, and in particular in one. And so I don't want it to be left aside. I think it's important. I think it's important to the people who live here, maybe not everywhere in the city, but certainly where we live here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Angie. And I can say Carter would tell you that first time we sat down after I was elected, I said, Carter, the UVM MOU is a top priority. And I do think we have an opportunity with the new president coming on July 1. So I hope by early fall, we can have that conversation back on the table. So we're already talking about it. And I agree.
I don't want to belabor the impact fee issue, but at the Planning Commission last night, we had a presentation from city staff about this. And I would just echo what Sharon said, especially as a large part of our municipal budget goes to interest on bonds. And as we continue to bond more and more, and the burden really of those falls on our taxpayers. I think city staff need to look a little more creatively and a little less restrictively at the use of impact fees for eligible projects. Parks, especially, as Sharon mentioned, the South End Innovation District is scheduled to could raise a substantial amount of impact fees for parks. They will be located right next to Callahan Park and will be making major use of that. And it just seems to me like a really odd time to comprehensively look at impact fees for the first time in 30 years and scale them back when the last big major development is going to be in the city is going to be happening over the next couple of years. There's lots of arcane rules around impact fees and how they're used. Some of that was alluded to earlier, but I just felt that people, the staff presentation that we got at the Planning Commission was just really, it just felt like, folks, you got to be a little more creative and don't look at, absolutely the letter of the law. Just be creative and flexible a little bit. So just that's going to come back to you. As part of that, you're also going to be seeing some revisions proposed to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. And with affordable housing being as important an issue in the city, I would just urge you to look at those closely. One of the things that will come to you is elimination of the higher 25% inclusionary requirement that is currently used in the waterfront and was used for Cambrian Rise to get many more units from affordable units from Cambrian Rise than we otherwise might have, because it used to be waterfront zoned, and that was changed as part of neighborhood code. And I think that was not a good thing, not a good piece of neighborhood code. So basically, my understanding is you're going to see a proposal to eliminate that higher exaction for waterfront housing. And I some other things that you'll probably see in that proposal as well. We'll get a look at them at the Planning Commission first. But just heads up that that's happening, and it's going to be really important, I think, to make sure that our inclusionary zoning is as strong as possible and will generate as many affordable units as possible.
School commissioners?
Yeah.
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 Thanks, everyone. And
Thanks, y'all.
our city, my city email is now on the website, as is Carter's. So if you didn't get to share your priorities and would like to, please reach out.
Okay, well, thanks so much for having a counselor update that really solicited so much feedback from our group here tonight. It's really awesome. Gary and Matt, I see that you just came in. We're going to have you come up here. We're experimenting with some amplification tonight. So if you sit here and talk right into this microphone, folks will get to hear you extra. And you've got about 10 minutes, which is pretty short, especially with everything that's going on in our schools these days. So
on question answer tonight, or We can share a quick update about sort of the school district response.
So, this time of year is typically, a lot of staff are, involved in administrative turnover. So we do have two, principals who are stepping away. Sorry, I know. It's one of those times I had to keep a secret because I've known for a while. I just couldn't say anything to you. Sorry. To prepare you. So that's going well. We've had more applicants, I think, than we may have expected. Being a principal now, I just can't imagine wanting to do it. I didn't want to do it when I was a teacher and can't imagine doing it now post-COVID. So we have several, the IAA position is a magnet school. So that's a sort of different target audience. SA, I'm sorry. I had something else on IA on my mind. Sorry. So that both slowed the process a little because the new HR people didn't realize there was this different pool of people who might want to be interested, but were reached through a different set of journals or websites. So SA is about a week behind Edmonds Elementary in their searches. There was a call it tonight community forum. Thank you. My forum was in my mind. I knew there was something else where they got to meet a couple of the candidates, and as that gets fleshed out a little, probably one of us will talk about that person when they're selected next month. We should know by in both cases, because this is a really intense time for principals as well as teachers to sign their next year's contract. So if you're in Vermont and you've signed a contract, you're sort of off limits to other schools. It's sort of a, sorry to be parochial, but it's the old gentleman's agreement that the superintendents sort of have between each other to not poach each other's people. They're coming out from out of state, all bets are off. And that's happened kind of recently for us, that we've taken somebody who's signed a contract elsewhere and been able to hire them here. So that's, otherwise the funding, Troy and Brian have been presented a bill this week, sort of the Democratic response to the governor's reorganization plan. I have not parsed it well enough to know, but certainly I talked to our superintendent Monday night, and my thinking was there's no money saved in the Scott plan, really. The bulk of the money that he does point to is because Chittenden County will be a super district. And so his people are projecting savings there. That is really the only tangible money from that plan. And even then it could be temporary because you're really just putting a new layer of superintendent onto this district that's twice the size of the next largest. And they're really just going to be managing the superintendents who are already in place. It's too big a district for one person to manage. So that's my feeling. My worry, and this is where I'll be a little partisan, is that the Democrats haven't taken this up, not really. My wish is that the leadership had said to the governor, there are no savings in your plan. And until there are, don't come back. Because now the only savings are incredibly unpopular choices. It's closing schools. That's really all they have. Or fix the healthcare costs, or fix the pension costs, or fix the sort of systemic internal problems that are driving our budgets. So, and no one is. Maine's about 10, 15 years ahead of us, went through all these same things. They tried to combine supervisor unions. They tried to save costs that way. And they looked at closing schools and they gave up 5 years in because it was so incredibly unpopular and it didn't garner any savings. So I'm wishing that the governor had hired someone for the Secretary of Education that had been in one of the states that actually succeeded at changing public education in a way that would garner some savings, but instead chose somebody from the charter school industry, which it seems to imply that's his goal. Don't know. Anyway, are there savings there? There's some, but not, the money's just going to somebody else rather than public schools. If you do charter schools, somebody's got to make a profit off those schools. And the students are the ones who lose out because the teachers will be paid less, no certification required, no real training required. So anyway, Troy and would know better, and maybe next month they can come and tell us the process.
I just had a question. Is that actually going to be brought to a vote this session?
Tomorrow. Yeah.
Wait a minute. You're voting on the district proposal tomorrow?
No,
Like the big, sorry.
Yeah, you want me to tell you?
Yeah, that'd be
So what we're voting on tomorrow is not the final plan. If you want, I can tell you what each section does briefly, or you can wait and see how it goes tomorrow, but we're not deciding all that tomorrow. It's a step towards deciding that.
I'll do an email once.
Yeah.
that happens.
I can tell you in 2 sentences.
No.
Would you say? No, I'm not going to. I think what I'll say is it's going to create a commission of people to look at those new districts. It sets class sizes and a few other pieces, but it doesn't make any final decisions yet. And I can send a copy of the bill to someone if they could send it out to the NPA tonight so you all can see it.
Thank you. Do you anticipate?
Well, it's more like a 3-pager, but yes. I have it right here.
Just quickly, Brian, what's the bill number?
454.
454?
Okay, thanks.
Do you anticipate that the final decision happens this legislative session, or will that be like next spring? Next.
You can answer that one if you.
We have there's a whole, I mean, without it in front of me, I did, no, that's all right. And maybe this is a draft form right now, but it really is laid out nicely with regard to what we can anticipate over the next 3 or 4 years. So there's a lot of information. I think maybe Brian and I can just combine what to send out to whom. Yeah.
3-pager, and I can send it out to you all. If there's an email address that someone, I'll send it to Selena. She'll send it out to all of you. I have this thing with the words. But that's the timeline.
That would be great too.
I'll send you everything.
Do you want to add before we basically have to
Sure.
move us
The
to
one thing that's kind of popular in the news and in the area was that the federal administration sent a note to all school districts in Vermont saying that they wanted to make sure that they were complying with Title VI, which is the discrimination compliance. And being the federal government's current view on that. Other states in the area, Maine, New York, I think New Jersey, have sort of directed that to their central Department of Education in the state to ask them to respond on behalf of all districts. Secretary Saunders, the Secretary of Education in Vermont, agreed to do that. So that's off the Burlington School District's plate. I don't know that she has sent a formal response at this point, but she did sort of provide our Superintendent Flanagan affirmation that she upholds Burlington School District's values. So there's that update. Yes.
Do we have a backup plan if the feds really do some substantial cut in education? Or are we just going to collapse?
There are our Burlington School District has been fairly did some good financial planning in the way that they structured their budget and made a bunch of reductions. In fact, there was a announcement of a new hire in the central office that was a combination of 2 positions that resulted in about an $80,000 a year savings. So they're sort of being very fiscally thoughtful and responsible. We get a lot of money. Most of the Burlington school budget comes from the state. So we would be it would not all collapse, but it would be harmed.
So we do have some ready pots of money typically each year that are, so we have an audit, pretty heavy audit that's done. There's typically about $2.5 million that are held in escrow until that audit is completed. And that's money we didn't spend from the fiscal year before. So that's, we've gone through that process. We have about $2.5 million sitting there as an emergency fund if we need it. What we're staring at with some fear is that we did the IAA Wheeler reconstruction using the COVID money, the ESSER funds, and those were just chopped. And then the directive came back, reapply, and they might be restored. Can I say this without being too political? So far, the restoration has gone to Republican states and not to Democratic states. So we're hoping that's not going to be the case, but it is one of those backdoor ways that they've been trying to save funds, but not for, not for Republican states. So anyway, that's where we are. So we do have some reserve funds, depending on which plan gets passed in the legislature. If we don't get the weighted money that we did before, we're looking at, our office has put out 170 staff cuts. I don't think that's really the case, but because there are other ways to save money, but they are all unpopular. So that's the other looming thing out there is if Governor Scott's plan were to pass, we would be looking at drastic staff cuts because of our additional costs for the English learning community, the full majority community, the special ed community, and the poverty community. Because they are many needs, lots of needs that are a lot of which are not reimbursed otherwise.
I recognize that that's a really, really tough note to end on. And I'm sorry to be in the position of moving us along because I feel like we could have, and I think probably should think as a steering committee about scheduling a more robust discussion at a future meeting just about everything that our schools are facing and how we might be able to support and dig in as a community. So we'll put a pin in that. Gail, I would like to invite you to come up and talk to us about the Burlington History and Culture Center. And you're scheduled till about 8. You can go a few minutes after, since we're starting a few minutes late. And if you're willing to leave some time for questions at the end, I'm sure people would love the chance to be able to ask you. And should I go ahead and hand out the survey you brought now? Great. Okay.
Everyone. I have a soft voice, so I just want to be sure that you could hear me. I am really happy to be here to talk about the Burlington History and Culture Center. As you see, a community-driven initiative. And I'm also really pleased that there's time, and I'm really wanted to make a lot of time tonight to hear your suggestions, hear your questions, because it is not going to be a top-down type of organization. Our mission, which we created about 2 years ago, and we refine it, but we're making some progress. The mission is to broaden our historical perspective of Burlington. It's to celebrate our historical diversity with the many cultures that built our Queen City. And we also are going to present the overlooked stories of the men and women who built Burlington and are still building it. And when we talk about that, we're talking about the people who actually made the bricks and put the bricks into the buildings and put the slate on our roofs and cut our hair or open the different markets and grocery stores, and help people through tough times by giving credit. So the regular people, not just the people who had the money to pay for the buildings. We think knowing our diverse history is going to help us see ourselves as active participants in the city and in our history. And as important as we thought that was when we created this 2 years ago, it's that much more important now. So the next slide says close to 200 historical societies throughout Vermont, but we don't have one in Burlington. And that gas of, it's people go, I'm so surprised, why not? Or we've thought about that and never understood that, and it is time to have one. So we have the Chittenden County Historical Society. We're working in collaboration with them, but we don't have a separate one for Burlington. Do ask who the people are and thinking about Ward 1. But I do want to say first that Burlington does have a history museum, and we don't want to ignore in any way the Ethan Allen Homestead. They've done a terrific job in presenting the long history of the Intervale, but we want to go further than that. We want to cover the whole of the city. We don't intend to duplicate the efforts of other groups. We want to complement those efforts, and we're working in collaboration, and we're trying to form new collaborations every day so that we complement each other and we don't duplicate. For example, Ohavi Zedek, just looking right here, is expanding the education of Jewish history and culture with the Lost Mural and Copper Arc exhibits and parts of Ohavi Zedek. And so if people are coming to us to ask about the mural, we'll use the resource and send them to Ohavi Zedek and complement each other so that we're both talking about what we have available to in our history. So the connections to the people in Ward 1, if we go back to that, the man on the left is George Walter Williams. If we want to go, can you go back? Or okay, thanks. So and the next one, the woman on the left is Melinda Moulton, but this is George Walter Williams, known as Walter. He reportedly, because we always are careful about saying who's been first, but it looks like Walter Williams was the first Vermonter of color to graduate from UVM's medical school, and that was in 1909. His father was a barber in town, and as Black men, occupations that were really open and let people make a good earning, a good living. Barbers were one of those, and chefs were another. And then you know that those are the Sisters of Mercy, portion of a picture that was in the Burlington Free Press. They came here to this area, to Mansfield Street, back in 140 years ago. They worked as teachers, they worked as administrators in education, they took leadership roles in nonprofit groups, and they were involved in social justice before we use the term social justice the way we do today. So you have a good representation there. And now we could look at the next picture. So this is the group of co-founders. We deliberately chose Henry's Diner. Henry's Diner is the oldest restaurant in Burlington with the same name. It's been here since 1925, and since we're talking about history, we thought it was a good place to take our pictures. There are 4 of us as co-founders, and left to right, that's Melinda Moulton. That is Elise Guyette. There's me, and I think I'm wearing the same sweater. And there is Lisa Evans. So one thing you'll obviously notice, the 4 women, 3 of us with white hair. So we are not going to make decisions about what needs to be in this history and culture center. We are really making this community driven and getting input. And I'll explain in a few minutes the different ways we're getting input. So our backgrounds, just to kind of push them all together: developers, historians, fundraisers, museum directors, authors, nonprofit and for-profit leaders, and we mobilized to form this group. The plan for this came about some years back. Elise Guyette and I ran the Burlington Edible History Tour for 5 years before the pandemic hit. And during that time, we learned so much about the different cultures in town, met so many incredible people around. And so when the pandemic came, we still wanted to do tours. We helped create a tour for historic New England in the Old North End about community stores, then and now the markets. And then after that, we went, so what's next? And so we said we could write a book. We thought about that, about the different cultures, and put in some of the recipes that we found. Or we could create a museum of culture and history of Burlington. Because as we walked around, we kept saying, why isn't there one? Here's a perfect place to start one. We'd walk on Battery Street and see some of the oldest buildings there, and we go, this would make a good place. So we then said, let's go call Melinda, let's go call Lisa. They said, let's go the museum route. And that's how this was born. So if we go to the next slide. I don't think that Jason is here. I didn't hear his name called. But this is my favorite quote and slide. And he said this when Ava Sullenberger was interviewing him as he was in St. Joseph, as he was in the Greenmount Cemetery. And the more you know about your local history, the more you care about a place. And I think Ward 1 with your neighborhood council really loves its history, knows about it, and really cares about your area. And we're hoping that we have collaboration with your neighborhood council and do some work with you, because again, you have a lot of the information that doesn't have to be duplicated, but we could support each other. We went on what we call a listening tour, and we spent the last 16 months of an 18-month planning time for a history, for a listening tour. And we received $10,000 from Vermont Humanities. We thought we would have it for 3 years. We did get our second amount. Who's going to get money in the next year from anyone in humanities, arts, science? I could go on. We don't expect that, but we have been able to gather information, use this time to gather information by having focus groups. We've had 14 focus groups. We've done interviews with experts, with other people who are neighbors. We've been to the NPA meetings. We have been distributing surveys. And so if you do take that survey, we would be so appreciative of that. We already have comments back from 400 people plus. We're going to keep doing this till the end of June. And at that point, we'll have a professional evaluator look through all of the answers that have come in. We'll find out what the themes are. And then we'll also look at what suggestions were made that came up the most often. And at the end of that evaluation, and at the end of our second year, we're going to start to put together priorities for the next few years and move forward. We don't have a physical space in mind with funding the way that it looks like it's going to be. Having a small space may be all that we need. There are so many ways to have history and culture told through tours, through online digital, virtual tours, gardens outside with signs, and there are different ways to do this. And we're interested in finding out what you have to say. We have been working with people within Ward 1, Brian. Thank you, Brian's project with
It's good.
It's fabulous project, and we're hoping to talk some more about it. Paul Asbell, who's from this district, he was in our musicians focus group. Martine was in our focus group. Brian is now an advisor on our advisory council. We talked to Ava Solberger because she has done terrific work, and we want to cooperate more and collaborate with sharing names. Then and Angie Chapel Sokol's son Sam speak at Fletcher Free Library. It was just one of the best presentations ever. He has such heart and goodness. He has been working with Jose, tell me, Jose's what? Andreas, thank you. In the World Central Kitchen. He has edited the cookbook from this group, and the cookbook is named the World Central Kitchen Cookbook, Feeding Humanity, Feeding Hope. And what Sam spoke about was about the hope that that group gives in communities and how to involve community members so that they could give hope to each other. It was really a terrific presentation, and food is, I think, central to so many of our feelings, but we're hoping to make some more connections. We'll always be including food when we're talking about culture. I've placed papers with the UARC code around the room. Again, we hope that you'll take those. So if you want to. Okay. Okay. So if you just want to move that quickly, because that's really what I was just going to show. We are asking you to tell your stories. And if you want to go to the next one. One of the ways to shape the future is to participate, sign up as a volunteer, contact us. And if you donate $10 or more, but even if it's $10, we don't have categories of donations and giving. We have, you're a founding funder if you give your $10, and we would certainly welcome that. And then the last slide is another way you could participate is to, that's really small. It is saying that on April 17th, there is an event at Burlington Beer Company, and the event is going to take a look at why the Burlington Beer Company, but where it is now. It used to be factory 1901 to 1911 for the Lumiere North American plant. We became pioneers in Burlington of color photography and cinema. And the story that will be told by the person who's speaking, Ugo Kazan, who is a fabulous researcher, is a fascinating story. So I hope you'll come. It starts at 6 o'clock. And it's free and open to the public. There's free appetizers. And then we're going to, at that place, launch the our project for Burlington Untold Stories project, and we'll start our fundraising there for that. But it is free, and if you come in and enjoy the presentation, we just would love you to come. So, yes. We have, we promoted this on front porch forums. We have used that to get people to sign up on surveys, and we had a very good response from that.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, we didn't get it on ours. It was forwarded.
Yes, it was. There was a link at the bottom. I tried to do the survey. Okay, there it is.
But the survey, again, is available. If you go to our website, you also can get on the survey, and we would love you to.
I'd like you to maybe run that again through Front Porch Forums, because I did miss it the first time. I'm sure there's a lot of people, and it sounds like a great event. And people will want to know about that. I think it'd be really nice with all wards. Thanks.
We'll send that out again. Absolutely. Yes.
This is so wonderful. I wish that I had a friend, Sarah Dopp, who passed away last year. And she was involved in the State Historical Society and Chittenden County. She lives in South Burlington. And she would have been such an asset to, she would have been such an asset to you. You probably knew Sarah Gale. And so as I think about this, I think of all that she could have offered us for her own insight. I mean, she was passionate and dedicated to this, but I know you. Full disclosure, I used to be on the board of directors for the YMCA, and Gail was there also. And everything you touch, you do so well. So I'm really glad you're there leading this or being part of this process. And I'm really excited about it because as someone who wasn't born here, I've discovered things over and over. And I think for people that we're going to have so much new housing and new members of our community, that a place to kind of get a sense of who we were and who we are and who we're becoming is really important. So thank you.
And Sarah was involved with our group from the beginning. So her contribution of her knowledge will persist. Well, thank you all. Please let us know.
Thank you so much, Gail. That was great to hear about, and I think you heard a lot of enthusiasm in the room, and thanks for calling Sarah Dopp into the room with us. For those of us who knew and really admired her, it's an important touch point in this kind of work. So thank you. Charles Dillard, our city planner, I think we're going to hear from you a little bit about the transportation demand management plan, but also just about how you might be able to engage with our neighborhood around kind of neighborhood planning efforts. Does that sound right?
That's right. I'm only gonna tell you about the city's housing target. Sure. I'll text you after if you don't mind. That's a really high level kind of overview. Hi, everybody. My name is Charles Dillard. I've been here before recently. I'm the director of the Office of City Planning. Don't have a ton of time tonight, but I do want to cover the TDM action plan. TDM is Transportation Demand Management. It is a jargony term, but it is all about non-infrastructural ways to make it easier for people to move around Burlington. Programs and services mostly. Also want to talk about, our planning process, our comprehensive plan, and how we use area plans and corridor studies to take deeper dives into specific areas of the town. You may know that we're doing a plan for the new North End right now. That's a 1-year planning process. I'll tell you a bit more about that. It came up a lot during the negotiations of the MOU with the medical center. And the last thing I want to talk about is just the housing targets. There's legislation from 2024 in Montpelier that directs every regional planning commission to establish a housing target for the region, and those are therefore also distributed down to each municipality. And we have our draft housing target as well as a draft land use map. So they sort of go hand in hand, and those are both open for public comment right now. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that with you. You can go to the next slide. So the TDM action plan is the result of a study that our office did in conjunction with our colleagues in DPW and partners internal and external to the city, the citywide transportation options study. That study itself was a request from City Council in 2019 when the city started to reform parking regulations, specifically removing parking requirements for developments. Ultimately, now we have parking maximums. And so, you know, when those rules were established, council said, well, we also need to understand our own transportation demand management regulations and policies. They implemented a framework at that time, but it was always sort of intended to be just a first step. So this study is where we ended up. The goals were to evaluate those rules that we had on the books, we still have on the books, identify opportunities to expand TDM beyond new development. TDM is really a development tool. So when somebody comes in for development of a certain size, it's not sort of typical small house work, bigger projects, office projects, multifamily projects. They would be required to implement some TDM practices on their property, things like transit passes, car share membership, that sort of thing, education for tenants or employees. And then the third goal was to explore models for neighborhood-based TDM. TDM around the country is not successful in providing programs and services to people who live in diffuse neighborhoods like this one, where there are many landlords, many homeowners, where there are people of different income levels dispersed in a neighborhood. TDM works really well when you have one large employer who can say, I am providing all of my employees with a parking pass, or not a parking pass actually, with a transit pass. Or I'm a landlord and I have 50 tenants and it's easy for me to provide those sorts of things. It's not easy though when there are many different landlords. And so it's not well understood, but we are trying to tackle it here in Burlington. You can go to the next slide. So the TDM action plan includes an analysis of our previous plans and current studies, best practices nationally and around the world, with a specific focus on sort of communities that we consider our peers in terms of size and capabilities. A summary of the public engagement process, as well as a toolkit of strategies, which is ultimately the real action plan. Next slide, please. So there's 4 categories of tools in the TDM action plan. Transportation options. So these are specific ways of moving that the city should prioritize: car share, transit, biking, that sort of thing. Regulations and plans. So what are the rules that we need to have in place? Management and funding. What do we need to do sort of behind the scenes to make this a reality? And finally, that neighborhood TDM piece. So specific strategies for neighborhoods. You can go to the next slide, please. A little bit low res here, but this is really just to show you this top bar, the header that's outlined in red, includes an identification of the strategy number. what the strategy is. I will send you a link to this plan afterwards so you can read through it. Whether or not the strategy applies citywide or specifically to those neighborhood TDM planning tools, a relative cost, sort of order of magnitude, and a time frame. Everything from near term that can happen this year to long term, which is years out. So when you do take a look at the plan, just keep your eyes on those columns on the right. We'll give you an idea of when we might be thinking about implementing some of these. I should also say that currently right now, we are in the process of reviewing this plan with the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee of the City Council. I've been going back there, a few times this year. I'll be going back in a couple of weeks, specifically to start talking about the zoning amendment that would implement the TDM ordinance and replace our current rules with a new point system that I can tell you about. You can go to the next slide. This is going to be tough again, but this is just also a snapshot of the way the report is formatted. The image on the right is a screenshot from the report. We talk about what are the benefits for Burlington for each of these strategies. What are the recommended sort of sub steps. Each action item has one or more specific strategies that can be implemented. And yeah, that's just to give you an idea of how to read the document. Next slide. So the next 4 slides are really just a snapshot of the 4 buckets. It's going to be tough to read, but in transportation option strategies, we have things like work with the first one, for example, work with CarShare Vermont to expand CarShare services and supporting programs. So some of the sort of sub steps there might be like improve the permitting process for CarShare to access on-street parking spaces. It can be difficult for CarShare to get those spaces. Work on education. We did some really interesting and inspiring engagement with AALV and other sort of new American communities, and CarShare is a very novel concept to many people, but especially those who are new to this country. It's not really something that is present in a lot of the countries where our neighbors have come from. And so education about CarShare, I think, is really important. I think notably, though, the Old North End is CarShare Vermont's best performing neighborhood. And I think by far, there's a lot of use of CarShare in the Old North End. And so that's something to build on. Other strategies here: work with Go Vermont to expand a ride matching or carpool program, expanding walk to shop, which is little trolleys you see, the green sort of shopping trolleys, that sort of thing. Including another one is updating the city's own employee parking benefits program to incentivize sustainable commuting options. I can tell you that, we pay $20 an employee per year to park in a parking deck, which is not really incentivizing people to use other modes of transportation to get to work. So providing equal or better benefits to people who are willing to take transit or walk or bike when they can. The next slide talks about regulations and plans. And again, the top 2 are the big ones here. So updating and expanding our ordinance. Talked a little bit about that. We're going to be moving to a points-based system, which is sort of the state of art here, where, basically a developer comes in and there's a menu of options that provide some flexibility, and each sort of strategy has a point total attached to it, and the development will have to reach a sum total according to the size of the development. So if it's a really big multifamily project, they would have a higher point total to achieve than a small sort of 4-unit project. And there are specific tools that are going to be required, always sort of education and marketing, making sure that tenants and employees know what their options are. And then there's some tools that are going to get a really high point total, offering a free transit pass, for example, to all of your employees or all of your residents or tenants can get you a lot of points. One tool is not going to get anybody all of their point total. So there's always going to be a sort of range of tools offered to tenants or employees, residents. Yeah, let's wait till the end. I'm almost done with the TDM portion, and then we can take questions on that. The next slide talks about management and funding strategies. And the one I'll just focus on here is that the consultants said throughout this process that if you're really serious about TDM, you need to have a full-time TDM coordinator on staff. We do not have that. Our TDM regulations are enforced now by my colleagues in the Department of Permitting and Inspections. And it's not, you know, they are not subject matter experts. They shouldn't be expected to be. It can be difficult for them to sort of enforce and manage TDM requirements. There's actually only a few developments that have come online that have been required to implement TDM. And for these reasons, you know, again, our consultant said you need a TDM coordinator. We've spoken about this, you know, I think we all acknowledge that we have a tough budget situation now. We have for the last couple of years, and we probably will for the next couple of years. And so I certainly don't expect that we will get a full-time TDM coordinator this year, but it's something that we are striving toward in the next few years that will make all of this work more successful. And the last little bucket here is neighborhood TDM strategies. So neighborhood TDM strategies, again, you know, things like establishing a public bicycle lending library. So just like a book library, but for bikes, where it's free for somebody in your neighborhood to go take a bike out. Sometimes some bike libraries around the country will let you take a bike out for a week. There are specific bike libraries that have cargo bikes, you know, the big buckets that you can stick your kids in it, your dog, you can take it to the hardware store, the grocery store, pick stuff up, ride it back. Stroller libraries. There's a lot of parents who don't have strollers. Strollers are expensive and they break frequently, especially on sidewalks that aren't sort of in good repair. And so this is a really interesting model too. We know it would help a segment of our population. Establishing community mobility hubs, so locations, places within a neighborhood where all of these sorts of things are co-located, where the bike library might be there, where there's stroller library, bus stops, information about transit, sometimes even, you know, sort of delivery, first, last mile delivery options. During when we were doing the study, I went to visit some friends in Toronto and actually saw one of these, and it was a little shipping container that was all fancied up. It looked nice, but it was in a neighborhood, and everybody's Amazon UPS parcels were delivered to the hub. And there was a line of people picking up boxes, and it really keeps all of those trucks off of your neighborhood streets. They're unsafe for kids a lot of the time. They cause poor air quality. They damage the roads. So that's sort of part of the vision here. There's a few others here. I won't sort of go into too much detail, but we are working on neighborhood TDM planning in the New North End plan right now. And it's our goal to methodically go throughout the city and establish neighborhood TDM plans for every sort of neighborhood that we can. I can stop there if there's questions about TDM before I jump into the other topics.
So one question for TDM and one question for neighborhood. The TDM, if in the point system you described, which is really interesting, I think, and allowing developers to pick and choose what TDM components they want. If indeed they don't reach that target number, is there, I'm not supporting this, but I just want to know, would there be a way that they could pay money into a parking fund to make up that difference? You know how there are things in planning where if you don't achieve something, you can put money into the housing trust fund or whatever. And so I didn't know whether that was a component. You don't have to answer that tonight if you don't know, but I just wanted to know about that. And the second thing is just for everybody, I've been following this. I've been going to the Tuke, and the thing that I think it's light on is the fact that I drive, but I also walk a lot. And although we have a bike walk council, it is a bike council. Let's be real about it. I don't think we make enough pedestrian improvements to make it easier for people to navigate the city. And I see this plan, the neighborhood TDM, being light again on that. And I really think there need to be ways of thinking about benches for older people, maybe to sit down occasionally as they're walking. But there's such benefit to walking. You don't have to deal with anything mechanical except your feet. And so I just hope that that will be taken more seriously. I really feel we fall short on that. But anyways, thank you for the presentation. And I know that the residential parking is off the table right now. So even though it's on our agenda for all of us, thank you.
So, your first point, if somebody doesn't reach their point total, under the sort of vision of this ordinance, you wouldn't get a permit. You have to reach your point total. Some communities take the approach of, the points are equated to an actual reduction in vehicle miles traveled, and they might analyze that, and if it's not performing as expected, then there are ways that cities can try and exact more out of them or require them to do different things to say, okay, well, this strategy is clearly not working, you do something else. We don't, again, we would need a full-time TDM coordinator to be able to do all that. We'll see. I will also say that Winooski and South Burlington are also in the process of, South Burlington has just adopted their TDM rules. Winooski is in the process of adopting theirs. We're trying as best as we can to equate them. Theirs are sort of close, but we want to make sure that there is some consistency across the region in terms of what we're expecting to reduce VMT across our county. Yeah, parking is the toolkit. There's 22 strategies in this action plan, and the goal ultimately is to get the entire action plan adopted by the city council, but we are going to go through this methodically with Tuke and say, well, what's a priority? They've already identified that the ordinance, which I agree with, is a priority, so we're going to start there, and we'll continue to work with them on reviewing the whole plan. And if it's the case that one or more strategies are not something that the Tuke or the council agrees with, it's not a problem to take that out, as long as we're still meeting our vision of reducing VMTs and making it easier for people to move around. There was something else in there, but
Emphasizing
pedestrians, yeah, that's more often an infrastructural thing. Although I will say that in town I came from, Raleigh, North Carolina, they had a program where in the mornings and evenings, this was pre-COVID days, when people were walking to and from their offices, there was a sort of walk buddy program to help, you could call up the downtown organization, and they would send an ambassador, downtown ambassador, to walk you to your car in case you didn't feel safe walking through downtown, that sort of thing. And so that would be a pedestrian friendly TDM tool.
Residential parking aspect of this, so that the neighborhood can get feedback.
Whenever Tuke takes that up, likely, but the breath, it could be a while.
For a while up there.
So this is just a comment. I hope that you are including in this plan ways to de-incentivize students having cars on campus.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is something that we're gonna
de-emphasize or incentivize students having cars on campus? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we are gonna, part of the plan does recommend revising the institutional parking management plan. The three institutions, including the Medical Center Champlain and UVM, traditionally have submitted their required parking management plan together. That's why we call it the Joint Institutional Parking Management Plan. And in that, they do counts of streets really directly adjacent to the institutions. And it's my sense that's not adequate. Students are parking beyond just the one or two streets around all the institutions. They're parking where they live as well. And so we have a citywide transportation plan coming up starting very soon. And in that plan, we hope to do a more detailed investigation of the impact of student parking on Burlington streets.
So I just want to say that I wasn't meaning students parking on residential streets. I was talking about the number of students who live on campus who have cars.
Who have cars.
Cars, right.
Bringing cars to Burlington.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I hope that's something you will look at, because if we're really trying to move towards, a less car-centric community, I think that is one thing to look at.
Yeah.
The student population is very large, and that has an impact on our roads and safety.
Just a follow-up comment. I think that as the parents of students become more wealthy, that a higher percentage of students who go to school here have cars. So even if we had a constant number of students over the last 20 years, which we don't, we'd still see more cars in Burlington.
I'd like to go back to the RPP, because I think we need to get a straight answer as to who is calling the shots. Is the Took calling the shots? Are you calling the shots, or who is? Because we got so many mixed messages, and I thought you were going to come here. One of the things you were going to solicit feedback from is the RPP, and that seems like you're pushing that to one side. Someone's not being straightforward with us. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, not trying to sidestep at all with it. It's not one that we're prioritizing right now. Like, and there's 22 strategies, and the goal ultimately is to adopt the plan. And if the recommended reforms to RPP and the residential parking permit program are included, we will hope the council adopts that. The
But
recommendations.
I'm sorry, but if a city councillor
Let me
turns
just
out,
read what the recommendations were so everybody knows what they are. The first one is to review the residential parking permit pricing structure and program management operating cost. It's clear to our consultants that when we look at other cities, the parking permit program here charges a fee that is nowhere near what peer cities charge. An annual first permit is much lower. The recommendation is $25 a year. For the second, it'd be $50. If you need 4, it's $100. The second was to tie RPP permits to TDM programs. To use some of the money collected from the RPP program to pay for some TDM programs. And the third, which has been the controversial one, is as space allows and incorporate an employee permit option. So in areas that have the RPP, if it's demonstrated that the streets are not being fully parked, where there's lots of vacant parking spaces, then the consultant said, well, one thing you could do is to sell some permits to employers for people to park in the RPP, and that's what's been controversial. And I understand that. I do get the sense that, when you look at the map of streets that do have resident-only parking, and then even time-limited parking. There's lots of streets around them that don't have it, and so it's my sense that if I would, let's say I was an employee of the medical center and I was looking around for a parking space, and I couldn't park on an RPP street. It's not hard for me to just turn the corner and park on another street that doesn't have the program. And the consultant's thought was, well, if they're doing that, you might as well try and collect some revenue if the parking spaces are being left empty anyways.
So as I flippantly said at the TOOC, so you're going to put up a map online and sort of have a sort of a stub hub. You're auctioning off places for people to park, or what are you going to do? I mean, it's a load of procedural gobbledygook, as far as I'm concerned, that is going to lead to something that the neighborhoods don't want, and are not that they don't want, but are impractical and cause direct hardship.
Well, again, I mean, TOOC is going to continue to talk about this whenever it is prioritized, but I will just again say that it is not a priority of the TOOC, and I agree with that approach.
Thanks. People that have residential parking, it's a pain in the butt. And I don't care what I have to pay for it. I hate it if a guest gets a parking ticket. So we have residential parking because we need it. Mm-hmm. So to think you should sell parking or whoever to commuters is totally absurd. And I think that TOOC or you is keeping it secret, because I learned about it from Sharon and a few other people who have been following it. And anyone I've talked to, they're like, what? Like, that's ridiculous. And I also feel like if I have to pay to park on my street and it's a fundraising mechanism, I think everybody in Burlington that wants to park on their street should have to pay. Because I mean, like I say, I don't like it. I have had guests get parking tickets because we didn't quickly go out and put a pass on their car. And yes, you get one mistake, but that's not very generous, one mistake. So to say you're not going to address it now, I want it taken off the board while we're still talking about it, because to me, like Richard said, that's really disingenuous to say, well, we're not going to talk about that, because I've been here long enough. I was on the parking thing with Richard many years ago about residential parking. I think the city will wait until our guard is down, I hate to say it, and then pass this.
Well, that's not the way my office will operate.
Good.
Well, it did on the neighborhood code, to be fair.
True.
Yeah, and as I said at the TOOC, using commuter and let's call it commuter parking. I mean, let's call it commuter parking. It's not employee parking. It's not like a pro-labor idea. Using commuter parking to pay for traffic demand management, transportation demand management, is like selling plastic bottles of water to fund recycling. It just makes no sense. And whatever you can do to stop this now and just say, can we have a public statement from members of the TOOC? We're still considering it, except this is out. I mean, it's just crazy.
Just in fairness to Charles, he's not a member of the TOOC. Okay, let's just make that clear. Okay, hang on. I've got the floor. Thank you. Okay. Just a historical perspective, Charles, since you weren't around when this was first created. All right. Boy, we're getting a little rowdy here, aren't we? Historical perspective, since Charles wasn't here when this when neighborhood parking was first created, and I gather quite a few folks who were in the room weren't around. This was instituted back in the 80s when my predecessor on the city council, by the name of Rick Musty, who was on lived on Brooks Avenue got this instituted. And the reason it got instituted was because UVM commuters were parking in Ward 1 residential streets. So the idea of now turning around and charging them to park on Ward 1 residential streets is, like Karen said, absolutely absurd. The whole point of this was to keep those parking spaces reserved for folks who live in the neighborhood. Just want to make sure that that original purpose of this is absolutely clear.
Sure, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that the recommendation is that for every street that has the RPP program, the idea would be that we would study those streets, count the number of spaces that are vacant continuously, and on any street that has an RPP applied to it, and there is regularly a number of vacant spaces, the consultant said other communities open those up to collect revenue. And that's the recommendation. It is not to say any RPP, any street with RPP, we would allow other employees or commuters to park on those streets. I want to make that clear.
Have like a member of the two committee here who wants to address us, and I'll just know, I'm keeping time, that we're already over time here, and I know we have some other topics we want to hear from Charles about, so just asking folks to all keep that in mind. But Evan, you have the floor.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to talk, and I didn't know that Charles would be here tonight, so it's good to, I didn't look at the agenda. I probably should have done that. I would say that this did come before the TUC. It is a meaty document. As you pointed out, I had to zoom in from out of town for it. I did make a motion to remove this because there was just too much public outcry, I guess outcry, because I got plenty of emails about it. I'm in the New North End. This is not a problem for the area that I represent, but I can see very clearly, having been a UVM student, having been a past UVM employee for 9 years, waiting on the green permit parking list for as many years as I did, that I am concerned about this, and I hear it again. I do think that I was surprised because I went into the meeting with the understanding that this was not, I went in with the same understanding as this gentleman here. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. And so I made a motion to remove it. And I think I was outvoted 3-1. And so it's going to be studied. But my understanding now, Charles, and maybe you can correct me, is that that would be studied by the DPW commission. And now that lays with them, not with the TUC, but I could be wrong as I had a lot going on that week. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
You mean this specific recommendation?
Yes, specifically, it's very clear to me that residents are uncomfortable with the parking spaces in their neighborhood being sold to inbound commuters who very well, we could be working with our regional partners for them to park elsewhere and use the buses that need the revenue to come in. So there are like other possibilities that we could be looking at.
I just want to say that Barbara Hedrick, who lives in Ward 6, Barbara Hedrick, who lives in Ward 6, made something that for the institutions, the goal is to reduce the number of cars that are coming in. We create shuttle service, we have satellite parking. So then to suggest that employers incentivize their employees to drive in single occupancy vehicles and park on our streets is contrary to what TDM is about. So it's inherent that this is illogical. And I know we do, this whole world is illogical right now, but I don't feel like we have to follow suit. And also, Charles, I want to just be really clear that when you look at one, like this counselor just said, when you look at Burlington, each section has different stresses and different needs. And this section and Ward 6 have a lot in common, and sometimes don't. But the stresses that we have in Ward 1 are even amplified because we have not only the university, but we have the medical center. And so they will eat up those spaces. And what you're saying is that if you do an inventory on my street, I live on East Avenue, and you see some spaces empty, if you take those spaces and sell them, I only have a driveway that can have one car. So I will not be able to have a visitor. If I'm injured, a V&A person couldn't come. If I needed some repairs, no repair person could come. So you're making it impossible for some people to live in their street. Other sections of the city some people have long driveways. Ward 6 is a little more affluent in some scenarios. And so they may be able to provide all of that parking off of the street. I'm not imposing it on them, but I'm just saying there are differences. And I think that needs to be realized also. So I'm incredibly disappointed that this component would move forward when it should be at least delayed or identified as something that is not active and shouldn't be adopted. I think it should be removed.
That is the case. It is delayed. Again, want to say it one more time that ultimately the goal is to have the action plan adopted, but part of this process with the TOOC is to determine which strategies are appropriate, which are not desired. And if they're not desired, they will come out of the plan. TOOC is prioritizing the TDM ordinance right now. We are pausing, therefore, on this RPP, and that's why I didn't come prepared really to talk about this.
Are really concerned about it.
Yeah, I hear you, and
Well, and Charles has a lot to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to try to direct this as well. We're already 15 minutes over. I really appreciate Earhart reminding us that Charles is a city staff person, not a voting member of the TOOC.
Right.
I hope folks will continue to make their voice heard on this issue. I think the TOOC member who's here, our city councilors, and Charles have definitely heard the strong sentiment tonight at the NPA about this. It's something that's come up periodically in our neighborhood. There was a similar proposal around meter parking back in 2015 when I ran for re-election to the council, and it was like the single most important issue that I heard about, knocking doors. So it is really a concern for our neighborhood, and I think we've done a great job getting that message across, and we're already over time. So if there's any last things you want to chat with us about, we'd love to hear about them and or give you.
I mean, I can very quickly just reiterate what I said during the MOU process with the medical center, is that it is my goal that once we finish the update to the comprehensive plan, which is going to take 18 months, that we will start an area plan for the east end of the city, including this area. That's what we will propose. We're a staff of 2, and there will be a third eventually. But that's the place where we would do detailed planning for areas like, Colchester Avenue, the areas surrounding the medical center, that sort of thing. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the housing targets, Act 47 and Act 181 specifically. Act 47 established housing targets for the state that, like I said earlier, also they filter down to each of the municipalities. The Regional Planning Commission has been working on a methodology to allocate the region's growth. Burlington's, there's a sort of low target and a middle target and a high target. We're focusing on the middle target for every municipality in the county. Our housing targets will have to be in our comprehensive plan. It is a housing target for 2050, and it is a total of 7,120 new homes in the next 25 years. That is about 400 less than South Burlington is on the hook for. Essex Junction is 3,000. There is a severe shortage of housing in the entire state of Vermont and Chittenden County. It is most acute. And we have been building 77 homes a year for the last 3 years. Our median home price is around $500,000 now. This target would increase that by almost fourfold. We would be at about 285 units a year. But I will say that the South End project alone, the Secord project, is 1,300 to 1,500 homes. The neighborhood code is anticipated to produce hundreds over the next 25 years. City Place, Cambrian Rise have a few hundred each still to come online. Included in that, hopefully, will be some student housing constructed on the campuses of the institutions. And so this will be a community-wide effort. Act 181 is the future land use map. That's also something that our plan will have to be consistent with. It designates certain parts of the city as downtown centers, village centers that become exempt from Act 250 entirely. And then other areas that are established as what they call Tier 1B, where housing projects only 50 units or less on 10 acres or less are exempt from Act 250. Essentially, the entire city of Burlington, outside of the conservation areas, which are the sort of Intervale, Rock Point, those sorts of places, are Tier 1B. There are 6 areas proposed for Tier 1A, that is downtown. There's a boundary, but most of what as downtown is within that. The South End Innovation District, which was rezoned a couple of years ago. Cambrian Rise, those are the 3 downtown centers. And then there's 3 village centers, the sort of Market 32 shopping center, the intersection of Flynn and Pine up to Shelburne Road. And then the third is a stretch of North Avenue in the New North End from Ethan Allen Parkway to just beyond the Ethan Allen Shopping Center, including the apartments at Thayer Commons that were constructed in the last 10 years. So they're supposed to work in tandem to help us get to the housing target. There are obviously real questions about the feasibility of this and the ability of Vermont to pull this off with our labor challenges, our logistic and material challenges. And I think that building material costs are going up and up because of the administration's chaos. And that's a real challenge for us. But if we don't hit the target, there are no penalties per se, other than people continuing not to be able to live here and our communities and economies struggling. I just wanted to make you aware of these. The public comment period is open until May 19th. If you Google CCRPC ECOS engagement, so it's Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, ECOS, ECOS engagement, it'll take you to a landing page where there are links to several documents, including an online interactive map where you can look at the future land use map and you can comment on the map itself. You just click and write your comment. They've received some comments about Burlington already, but again, that'll be open till the 19th. The Regional Planning Commission will take all the public feedback, summarize that. That will then come back to the Planning Commission, ultimately to the City Council. And then the map will be finalized. And then January 1 is when the municipalities officially apply for the Tier 1 designation, which again is the full Act 250 exemption. That's it. Lots planned.
Thank you for giving us your evening. Thank you.
All right, everybody, let's give a and hear how passionate we are about residential parking here in Ward 1.
Well, and the safety, the other thing that wasn't mentioned is that more cars on the street makes it less safe for walkers and bikers.
Yeah.
Because cars open. I mean, so like Steve said, it just seems like such an absurd thing to be under the parking management plan.
Yeah.
Or whatever it's called, candidated.
Understood.
This concludes our meeting.
I didn't say anything right.
He's not a member.
He's not a member of
No,
Speakout.
no, we
It's
know
like
it,
yelling at
but-
Charles.
They wrote